And welcome to another edition of Gridiron Nation on TSN, everyone. That is Gord in Studioville. I'm Jim on Football Island. And as always, it is time for the provocative, for the inventive, for the sometimes annoying. No, I'm not going to Gord first. I'm talking about the Stateside Five. In at 5, Quebec's Joey Corcoran. Only 3 receptions for 38 yards, but he did have the game-winning TD for New Hampshire in a 31-30 decision over Stony Brook. Ontario's Jalen Smith plays. Jalen Smith makes the 5. 9 tackles, 3 of them solo. However, it was in a road loss for North Texas at UTSA. From the South Shore of Montreal, Daryl Jabome with another solid outing. 5 tackles as Rutgers moves to bowl status with a victory over Maryland. Mississauga's Jet Elad in at 2, 7 tackles, 4 of them solo, a half TFL, and a pass defended in a convincing 41-20 win over San Diego State. And in at 1, finally, an offensive lineman from Mississippi State, Albert Reese IV. 6'7", 230 pounds. He's a redshirt junior from Edmonton, where his father played. Reese selected the top offensive lineman in the entire state. So we have an offensive lineman at the top of the Stateside Five, Albert Reese IV. By the way, we missed this a couple of weeks ago. We knew about it, but we want to talk about offensive linemen right now. Sam Carson at ULM, he was up as a semifinalist for the Campbell Trophy. And if you don't know what the Campbell Trophy is, it is the academic Heisman. He just missed the finalist list, but way to represent Canada down at Louisiana Monroe. But speaking of other offensive linemen, who are the guys on your radar, Gord?
Well, there's 2 guys that I want to talk about, and one is Albert Reese IV down in Mississippi State, the guy topping our Stateside 5 this week. And I'll be honest, Jim, I've been trying to find ways to insert this guy into the show pretty much throughout this season. The challenge has been that Mississippi State's been kind of awful this season. They're 2-8, and the only 2 games that they've won have been non-conference games against non-power conference opponents. They are winless in the SEC play, and they've been pretty irrelevant, unfortunately, this year. But that does not take away from the quality of play that Albert Reese IV has had. He's now into his 3rd year of at least partial season of starting, and is really looking like a veteran steadying presence on that roster. He was named the Mississippi State Offensive Lineman of the Year this past week here, which means that he's the top lineman of any team based in Mississippi. So obviously there are no NFL teams in Mississippi, but that's pretty good competition, especially given that the other school across state is currently ranked in the top 10 in the country. So he's had a very good season and positioning himself really well for a legitimate NFL shot. Another guy who's been doing really good work this year, and another guy who's had a couple seasons of experience now in really getting onto the field, has been Logan Taylor over at Boston College. And he has helped really stiffen up the interior of that offensive line that has a really good tradition all of a sudden of Canadian guys on it. Right, we remember Kyle Hergel playing there last season, for example. There have been others before that as well. So he's done a really good job on a team that has had a very solid first season with Bill O'Brien back in town. And so there's some real positives for both of those guys. I think both of them look like NFL bodies to me more than CFL guys. But they're definitely names to watch to keep up that tradition in the ilk of guys like Alaric Jackson a few years ago and others before that.
Ohio State, Indiana. You and I have been telegraphing this game now for weeks. It's the one game on Indiana's schedule that we had circled that is probably their roadblock to having an undefeated season. What does Indiana have to do outside of pulling a rabbit out of their hat to win this football game?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, everything's on the line because the top end of the Big Ten is really competitive, right? You've got Oregon undefeated. You've got Ohio State, who already has their one conference loss, but will likely, certainly if they win this game, will likely only have that. You've got Penn State, who's only got the one conference loss. So the challenge for Indiana is if they lose this game, they risk falling out of the Big Ten title game entirely, and that may jeopardize their playoff chances entirely. And unfortunately, what they're fighting against is they're not one of those brand name programs, right? The teams like the Ohio States can get away with a hiccup. Penn State can get away with a hiccup. Alabama can get away with a couple hiccups. right? These programs can get away with those because everyone expects them to be national championship caliber. And the challenge working against the underdog is that you just don't have that same margin for error. And for Indiana, what's unfortunate for the draw for them as well is that this game is being played in Columbus. I think if this was being played at Indiana, I would feel a little bit better about their chances of pulling off the upset with Ohio State not having that extra little advantage. But them having that all of a sudden makes this hill look really, really steep. And what I think is going to be the real difference for them is between the two offenses, like a lot is going to fall on our guy Curtis Rourke's shoulders, because I think that quarterback is basically the only position on the field where you could argue that Indiana might have a leg up on Ohio State. Will Howard for Ohio State has been good enough this season, but nowhere near as good as Curtis Rourke has been on the whole, I think. But if you look around him, as per usual, this offense is just chock loaded with talent. It's got Emeka Ibuka, one of the best receivers in the country on the outside. It's got the two-headed rushing attack of Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. It's got Chip Kelly, who I have my issues with, but he's still seen as good of an offensive maestro at the controls, right? This is an incredibly, incredibly talented team. And so Indiana's going to have to figure out a way to kind of pull a rabbit out of a hat here. And the thing is, like, nobody's giving them a shot, right? Even though they're the undefeated team coming into this, even though they're one of the great stories in the country going into this, all of a sudden everybody wants to look at their record and go, well, but they haven't really beaten anybody and not giving them much of a shot. And maybe they can parlay that into hanging around and scratching and clawing in this one. Ohio State is not infallible. We've already seen that this season, but it's going to be a very tall order for them.
Can a close loss and being one of the best stories in NCAA football still keep them in the conversation?
I think so, and I think a close loss is going to be key for them if they, of course, don't win this game, that is. And I think one of the real position groups that is going to have to hold up, I alluded to on last week's show, but it's their offensive line. And offensive line is probably the hardest position for an upstart program, a non-power program to build. And what we saw last game out in their game against Michigan, they're coming off a bye. The last game out in their game against Michigan, what we saw was that the step up in talent that Michigan's defensive line presented was really hard for that Indiana offensive line to handle. And so they're going to have to figure that out, because probably the only defensive line more talented than Michigan's in the Big Ten on the whole is Ohio State's. And so they have a really tough test in that position group in particular, and they're going to have to find a way to keep it close. I got to be honest, I don't want to be the pessimist, but this has blowout potential and not in Indiana's favor, so they're going to have to battle.
When we come back, we will preview the Vanier Cup. Stick around. Welcome back to Gridiron Nation, everyone. Now joined by Darren Dupont, the voice of the Canada West. Gord's still here, and we're getting ready to go on the final week of U Sports. Vanier Cup coming up in Kingston, Ontario. We've been promoting it all year at the bottom of your screen. But first, let's go back and take a look at one very entertaining and one somewhat interesting national semifinal. First of all, the Mitchell Bowl, Laval and Regina. When we were talking about it last week, we knew that it was going to be a low-scoring affair. Didn't know it was going to be quite this close, Darren. It was a bit of a thriller.
It really was. It ended up being a great football game. We know Laval favored coming in, rightfully so. You know, one of the best teams perennially in the country, but not much across the country known about the Rams. And people I talked to, weren't giving Regina much of a chance. And if you follow the Canada West, which we all do, we know this conference is deep. But, I knew going into this that Laval, I don't know that they've seen a defense like Regina's. To be honest, Regina, statistically a top 7 defense. I would put their unit up against anybody in the country. And they really proved it, on Saturday against Laval. And, Regina struggled to run the ball consistently. And what was their Achilles heel all year is they just never finished off drives. And that was Mark McConkey's, issue with this group is we just need to find ways to score when we get into the red zone. That didn't happen. They had chances. Defense played great. But in the end, a really talented, well-coached Laval team will play for the Vanier Cup.
Well, for a coach that was saying that his team had trouble finishing drives, one thing I didn't love was late in the first half, them pulling up to kick a field goal from Laval's 7-yard line. There's like a minute 15 left in the half. They're they're that deep. They're on the 7-yard line. Like you cannot be kicking 13-yard field goals if you want to upset Laval. Like that's just not the mentality. And I think unfortunately, Coach McConkey, as we alluded to on last week's program, like Regina's MO all year was that their defense would hold them in and their offense would find a way to get just enough points if they were going to win games. And I think that mentality of we just need, like, 3 is going to be big for us, we just need enough points, I think has served him well for a lot of this season. But I just didn't think, given the context, that was the great time to be doing that. I thought that you needed to be more aggressive there, and you needed to go, no, you know what? We have to have a little bit of an underdog mentality here. We have to understand that this is a team that is a perennial powerhouse, and as good as we think that we are right now, we need to go for the throat whenever we have the opportunity to do so. I did not love the conservative decision there, and then they lose the game by 3 points. And so I don't know if that would have paid off for them or not. I can't say. But I do think that as a coach in that situation, you're going, okay, well, worst case scenario here is if I go for it, I turn it over, and they've got 95 yards, 97 yards to go to get pay dirt in little over a minute. Like that's a good situation to put my defense in the worst case scenario. So I would have loved to have seen that. And I'm not saying that made the difference, but I would have loved to have seen that, a little bit more of that mentality. Otherwise, it's the same story with Regina that it's been all year. They scratch and clawed all day long. I thought Cameron Maw was outstanding for them on that defensive line. They were more disruptive up front than Laval was on the other side. And it's rare that Laval's defensive front gets outplayed in a game. So I thought, as per usual for the Rams, it was a great collective effort, particularly in the defensive front. And unfortunately, it fell just short. But I will give a shout out to No Pelche. I know was pretty banged up going into this game. He had statistically, I think it was actually his best game of the season through the air in this game. So that was a pretty impressive performance by him to try and make up for that lack of a run game you alluded to earlier, Darren.
Darren, considering that Regina hosts this game next year, what sort of parts are there for Mark McConkey to work with? And can they take a legitimate run at this thing in 2025?
You know, I think they can. The West is going to be really tough. It always is. And I think that's going to be the biggest question is, can you compete with Saskatchewan, Manitoba? It goes for anybody in the West, UBC, Alberta, Calgary. But they bring a lot of pieces back. You mentioned Cameron Maw, the fifth-year linebacker. He's gone. He's going to graduate. So is Jackson Sombach. He's going to go to the Canadian Football League. But Brandon Wong was a unanimous selection, at Sam linebacker. He comes back. You should bring back that defensive line and the 6'7" Tarek Polius, who now we got a taste of at the national level. You'll bring back Pelche, but you'll bring back Owen Sieben, who was the Canada West Rookie of the Year last year. And that receiving core should mostly all come back. Nick Surley, Frenzel Aranaza, who had really good seasons and showed up in the Mitchell Bowl. You're going to bring them back. You're going to bring your backfield with Marshall Erickson and Christian Katende back. You lose Parker Hodel on the line, but they're going to bring a lot of pieces back. If they can get out of the West, there's a chance they could play for Vanier at home.
Okay, let's go to the Uteck Bowl now. And Laurier had their way with Bishops. The game kind of played out the way that we predicted here on this show last week, that Laurier would get up above 30 against a single score. Bishop's team take their foot off the gas. Taylor Elgersma, outstanding in this game, Gord. Should we expect more of the same moving forward?
Yeah, I would say so. And one of the things that was nice to see from the program this past weekend was that they diversified their passing attack a little bit, right? It wasn't the Ethan Jordan show. Instead, it was the Ryan Hughes show. He goes off for over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game. And it shows that there are a variety of different ways Laurier can hurt you. I actually thought, we talked about Bishops wanting to hold up on the defensive side, particularly in this game. And that didn't necessarily come to pass on the whole. I thought their front held up nicely. Unfortunately, their secondary really struggled in this game, and Elgersma kind of had his way with them, certainly while this game mattered. And on the flip side, again, while this game was in the balance, just not a lot doing for that Bishops offense. They do put up some points to their credit in the second half. One of them a defensive score. They fall in a fumble in the end zone. But look, they're a scrappy team. I thought that they comported themselves pretty well on the whole, but I also thought that the outcome of this game was never really in doubt.
And it fits to Michael Faulds. He put on social media this week talking about how they've been practicing throughout, right up to the Vanier Cup, year after year, in the cold, at night, in all these different conditions, and it's finally paid off. And you mentioned Elgersma and the season he's had. I mean, we can't talk enough about how good it's been. Started a little slow, but every time there's been a major, litmus test, Western early in the year, past that, again in the Yates Cup, past that, here in the national semi, he just continues to rise to big moments. And I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't expect him to do the same in the Vanier.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Vanier Cup. We've got Laval, about 4 hours up the road from Kingston. And then you got the team coming from KW, which is, about the same amount of space away. So they should both travel really well to this game. I'm not sure if there's going to be a home team in this game. But outside of that, what are your keys to this game? I'm going to start with Darren.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of keys, and for me, I think Laurier goes in a little bit as the favorite in this game because of their dynamic offense. So can Elgersma move the football, against that secondary? But more importantly, can Tanner Nelms and that backfield for Laurier get something going on the ground? Regina really couldn't consistently enough in the national semi in the Mitchell Bowl. Can they move the ball on the ground? That's going to be a big question for me.
I would say on the flip side is also can Laval move the ball on the ground effectively? When their offense has had the cap put on it this year, it's been because they've gotten one dimensional and they haven't been able to carry it with their passing attack. We're used to Laval being kind of a ground and pound type of offense and one that will soften you up front and beat you in the trenches so they can put the ball over the top. And it's become a little bit more of an aerially driven passing attack with the offense this year on the capable arm of Arnaud Desjardins. But I think against a team that's going to put up points on the other side, no matter how good Laval's defense is, I think they're going to have to find some balance because it's not only about can you put up yards and points to keep pace with them, it's also about controlling the clock and shortening the game and keeping cap on things that way, right? And when Laval has been at their best historically, that's how they have won games is they have not just won the game on the scoreboard, but they have controlled that game throughout. And I think for them to turn this into that type of football game will be critical for them to be successful.
We talk about this game passionately on this show, but it's really an enigma to people across Canada. This is going to pop up for the first time on TV with the Vanier Cup over on Mother Corp on a Saturday. What are your thoughts? I'll start with you, Darren, about the anonymity of U Sports at the national level.
Yeah, it frustrates all of us because we feel like it should have a bigger presence. And there are enough athletes and enough great programs with great history and tradition that it deserves a larger presence. And, what was nice this year is we saw, the conference championship games on television. We saw them covered. We're seeing a little bit more. The national semifinals, over on carried online CBC. But I think as we get move forward, we're always going to fight and claw and scratch and try and get these games on TV. We have to be happy that we're going to get this game on a big platform. At least it's 1 week, but it's such a tough question because does it deserve it? Yes. Will it happen? I hope so. We just need to keep continuing to welcome in people who are dedicated to growing our game and continue to open doors and open conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we maybe have made too big of a deal out of getting it on TV specifically for this game. It's not necessarily that they need to have it on TV, but what they need to have is a consistent access outlet streaming wise that is on a known platform, not your own, that is not paid access to its own unique subscription service so not your own, and that you can market to people and make sure they're aware that it's there, because for too long this product has been consumed primarily by friends and family, right? And that's the circle that desperately needs to widen. And I think there's lots of opportunity to do that in the world of 2024-25. There are lots of platforms that you can work with that can increase that reach significantly, that won't require a huge capital investment from you, and that will allow you to go out there and reach people. But the challenge is that whether it's TV or not, and TV is no longer the be-all and end-all, but whether it's TV or not, it has been too hard to access this product, even when you are looking for it, for the last so many number of years. And so, maybe CBC Sports can carry a game of the week on its streaming service and just pick up the streams that the schools are doing anyway. Even something like that to give an accessible platform throughout the season would be a big step in the right direction without having to worry about making the jump over to a more traditional cable platform.
When we come back, we will talk about the most talked about guy in this segment, guys. Taylor Elgersma is with us. Stick around. And welcome back to Gridiron Nation on TSN, everyone. Now joined by the top quarterback in Canada, the top quarterback in U Sports, Taylor Elgersma. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
And we appreciate you being on just before you head up the road to Kingston and the Vanier Cup, where you lead a Laurier team that's been perfect this year. Certainly, getting to the Vanier Cup is more important than being perfect in terms of having no defeats this year, but it's a great mark to hit, isn't it?
For sure. I mean, that's the goal every single week is to go 1-0, and so that's kind of been our mantra through the entire season is just go 1-0 each week, and so far we've been able to do that. So we go 1-0 one more week, we're national champions.
Mike Faulds, your head coach, has obviously been working with you not just as a head coach, but a quarterback coach as well. Mike was one of the most outstanding quarterbacks we've ever seen at the U Sports level. What has it been like to work with Coach Faulds all these years?
It's been unbelievable working with Coach Faulds. I mean, um, obviously we know his pedigree as a player and as a coach, and I think that what I get most from Coach Faulds is leadership. He's an unbelievable leader. He's taught me how to be a leader of men, and he does that by example. And so, getting to be able to be in the room with him every single day, watch how he operates, the process that he has, it's really been something that I've tried to take control of as well within our locker room. And so being able to learn from a leader like that has been awesome for the last years.
Now, Mike said to me that you have a linebacker's mentality when it comes to playing quarterback. And Mike said back in the day he had one too. Describe to me what he means when he says linebacker's mentality.
I think he's just talking about our intensity and our competitiveness. I mean, when I get out in the field, I'm a football player just like everyone else. I want to win more than anything, and I think that the competitive fire, you can see that in me when I play. You can see that in him when he coaches, and I think that a lot of the best players in this game, no matter what the position is, you have to have a next level of competitiveness to be the best. And so I think that he has that. I like to think that I have that, and I think that you see this weekend a lot of the great coaches and players in this league have that extra juice. You see Ryan Dinwiddie with it on the sidelines every single week in the CFL, and so yeah, I think that's just what he's talking about.
You know, back in about 2010, a lot of us fought for an opportunity for Canadian quarterbacks at the U Sports level to learn at the next level. And lo and behold, in 2011, the CFL brought in the quarterback internship program. You managed to take advantage of that on two occasions. Tell me about that process and tell me about what you learned about process at the next level and how you've tried to incorporate it into your process.
Yeah, and so it's been really cool for me because I've been able to go to two different teams, see two different systems. I spent 2 years in Toronto and then a year in Hamilton this past off season. And so being able to be in multiple different locker rooms, be in multiple different systems has been something that's been super beneficial for my development. Specifically, when I was with Toronto in my first 2 years in the program, being able to run systems like that, ask questions. Coach Mike Miller with Toronto Argonauts was incredible with me when I was there, and so just being able to improve my processing skills, play with the guys that have played the game at that level, and learn and pick their brains. I mean, going through two complete training camps with Toronto and a complete training camp with Hamilton, you just naturally become better at football. You become more football IQ. I improved with my processing skills. I improved with my feet, and I improved my leadership just watching guys like McLeod Bethel Thompson, Chad Kelly do their thing. And so it's been an unbelievable experience.
What are the elements from that experience that you've brought into your game that you constantly work on to become a better quarterback?
Yeah, I think that some of it is even just pre-snap processing. Some of the stuff with Toronto, some of the concepts they were running, we took to our terminology and we applied it, and we were able to change up some of the ways that we were running different concepts, pair certain concepts with different ones on both sides of the field, and then based on some of the stuff that I learned in Toronto in pre-snap processing, boundary half location, free safety location, be able to make checks at the line of scrimmage to get ourselves into more advantageous play calls, and really just expand our playbook to that next level based on what I learned there. And so that's one thing that I would say. And then another thing, like I talked about, was footwork. Being able to watch those guys at that level, learn from those guys at that level, improve the efficiency of my feet a lot, improve the efficiency of my quick game a lot. And I think you see that in my completion percentage. A lot of that is from pre-snap processing and being efficient with your feet, understanding where your hots are, understanding where your pre-snap reads are. And so I think that having those coaches drill that into you for an entire month, multiple times, really engrades that in your head. And when I come back to here, it's just that much easier.
Michael O'Connor was a U Sports quarterback, and he managed to play a couple of years in the CFL, but Trey Ford has to be an inspiration as a guy that came through the Canadian system, then played at U Sports, and now is with the Edmonton Elks and is getting starts there. I'm assuming in one form or another you want to follow in their footsteps. Is that where your clear focus is for coming out of this season and heading into next?
Yeah, for sure. This is a big off season for me. I got one more week to focus on the most important goal, which is winning the Vanier Cup. But I know that once the work for that is done, then there will be a very, very quick turnaround for a big offseason for me to put in even more work to get myself individually in the spot where I want to go. And you talk about Trey, you talk about Michael O'Connor, guys that have played here and then gotten themselves looks in the league, and Trey continuing to get himself starts and earn himself starts is definitely something that's good for Canadian quarterbacks. For me, it's a lot about it just being an individual. I just want to be the best version of myself. My goal is to play professionally. I think that I can play pro, and I think that when you watch the tape, you'll be able to see that. And so it's all about improvement for me. It's all about using this offseason to become the best version of myself I possibly can, so that if I do get that shot and God blesses me with that opportunity, then I can make the most of it.
Now let's talk briefly about the Vanier Cup and the opponent that you face, the perennial favorites when it comes to U Sports football, the Laval Rouge Or. They're not going to make it easy for you, are they?
No, they're a very complete football team. They're very well coached. Their defense plays very well together. They understand their system. They understand their jobs. And like you said, they've been here many times before. That's why they are so good, is because of that coaching staff, because of the culture that they have. And so one thing that we've been talking about in our locker room is just that this is the way that we've wanted it to go the whole time. We got to face the team with the most Yates Cup championships in the Yates Cup. Now we get to face the team with the most Vanier Cup championships in the Vanier Cup. And so I don't think we'd have it any other way as a group. And so, yeah, I'm excited for the challenge. They obviously have a great defense and a great offense, and we're excited to get after it.
Well, Taylor, we are talking to you before the awards night at U Sports, and you're up for a Heck Creighton Award. Best of luck for that, and best of luck in the Vanier Cup.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
When we come back, it's our Games of the Week. Okay, there's been lots of talk on this show about the big game north of the border, which is the Vanier Cup on Saturday. But what of your NCAA Games of the Week?
Yeah, so I've got a couple to highlight here. One is the aforementioned Mississippi State. They're hosting Missouri. They are currently about a touchdown underdog in this game. And as I alluded to earlier in the program, they are winless in SEC play this season. So to avoid potentially going winless across SEC play, they've got two more chances. This week at home against Missouri, who's, I believe, 22nd ranked in the country, or next week on the road at Ole Miss, who's in the top 10. And so this is probably their best shot to get an SEC win this season, despite being touchdown underdogs. So they're going to bring everything that they can to this, their last home game of the season. And that means that it might be your last chance to see Albert Reese IV playing. They will not qualify for a bowl game. That's already set in stone. So he's a guy to watch starting on the left side of that offensive line. The other game that I'm really focusing on this week that I think is going to be interesting is Texas Tech. They are coming off a bye. And a guy that we probably should have talked about a little bit more over the course of the season is the transfer from Guelph, Devin Cromwell, who's gone down to Texas Tech, had a few really good games. He's a rotational guy in and out on that defense at the second level, playing kind of that nickelback position. I think Texas Tech's one of the teams that calls it the star position. He's done a really good job of transitioning from Canadian ball into American ball at a very high level. I've been very impressed with the way that he's settled in. Even a guy like Dean Leonard did not get a lot of playing time in his first year going down to the States. It took him a year. So Cromwell has done a really good job of transitioning quickly. They're going to be 3.5-point favorites in this game. They're already at that magical 6-win mark, so they don't need this win necessarily, but they will be at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's had a disastrous season, one of the worst seasons they've had under Mike Gundy. This game is right for the picking for Texas Tech, but it should be a shootout, as a lot of these Big 12 games are. One other game I want to mention really quickly, we haven't talked about Darius McKenzie at all this year. He's down at South Alabama and has been coming on strong the last 2 or 3 weeks. He's got 14 tackles over his last 2 games combined. They pulled off a really big upset against Louisiana this past weekend to bring them to 5-5. And again, that magic number of wins is 6. They're in a really good spot to be able to do it. They are a 22-point favorite as of right now at Southern Miss this weekend. So hopefully for our case, the Jaguars get that done and we can watch them in bowl season.
Thanks very much for this, Gord. And now for everyone on Crown Gridiron Nation, this is Jim Mullin saying, if you're in Kingston, get out and see the Vanier Cup. If you got high school in your community, let's get out to the game.